Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The morning after. Bobby Mills stood in his backyard, staring at the fresh dirt where his daughter's garden used to bloom. The morning dew mixed with diesel fuel residue, creating an oily sheen across the torn earth. Tire tracks from heavy machinery scarred the lawn like open wounds. Emma's sunflowers, her grandmother's heirloom tomatoes, the butterfly bush they'd planted together last spring, all of it gone. Daddy. 8-year-old Emma appeared beside him, her Batman pajamas still wrinkled from sleep. Her chocolate brown hair hung in tangles, and her eyes were red from crying herself to sleep. Maybe we can plant it again? Bobby's jaw tightened as he knelt down to her level. The same jaw that had earned him respect in 20 years of construction work. The same measured control that built his company from nothing into $1 million operation. We'll see, sweetheart. But Bobby Mills never forgot. And he damn sure never forgave. Bobby, stop being so dramatic. Diana's voice cut through the morning air like broken glass. She emerged from their 2-story colonial home, perfectly dressed despite the early hour. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her designer yoga outfit probably cost more than most people's rent. It was just a garden. Emma can take up piano or something more appropriate. Appropriate. Bobby's voice remained calm, but Emma instinctively stepped closer to him. She'd learned to recognize that particular tone. Yes, appropriate. Do you know what the Hendersons said about that eyesore? Property values, Bobby. We have to think about our investment. Diana's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with a small smile that made Bobby's blood run cold. Besides, it was attracting every pest in the neighborhood. Bobby remembered working 16-hour days to buy this house 12 years ago. He remembered Diana's excitement when they first moved in, how she'd talked about raising their children here, growing old together on the wraparound porch. Now she looked at everything, including Emma, like line items on a balance sheet. Come on, Em. Let's get you ready for school. Bobby took his daughter's hand, feeling how small and fragile it was. Grandma Rose is picking you up after school today. Diana's phone buzzed again. This time she turned away to read it, but not before Bobby caught the flush in her cheeks. In 20 years of marriage, he'd learned to read every micro-expression on his wife's face. This one belonged to someone else now. As they walked toward the house, Emma whispered, "Daddy, why did the garden make Mommy so angry?" Bobby squeezed her hand gently. The garden hadn't made Diana angry. What made her angry was that her daughter preferred spending time with her grandmother, planting seeds and learning about growth, instead of the pageants and social climbing Diana had planned. What made her angry was that Emma was developing values Diana couldn't understand: patience, nurturing, finding joy in simple things. What made her angry was that the garden represented everything Bobby's mother had taught Emma that Diana was not. Sometimes people don't understand what makes other people happy, Bobby said carefully. But that doesn't mean we stop trying to be happy. 3 hours later, Bobby stood in his construction office trailer, surrounded by blueprints and contracts. His company, Mills Construction, specialized in high-end residential projects. He'd built his reputation on attention to detail and keeping promises. His word was his bond, and breaking that bond had consequences. His phone rang. "Bobby, it's Mom." Rose Mills had raised Bobby alone after his father died in a construction accident when Bobby was 15. She'd worked 3 jobs to keep their small house, teaching Bobby that family meant everything and betrayal meant nothing would ever be the same. "Emma told me about the garden," Rose continued, her voice carrying the weight of disappointment. "That girl put her whole heart into those plants." "I know, Mom. Diana's lost her way, son. But Emma, that little girl needs to know some things in life are permanent. Some things can be counted on." Bobby stared out the trailer window at his crew preparing to pour a foundation. Foundations were everything in construction. Without a solid foundation, everything else was just pretense waiting to collapse. "Mom, how long has Diana been coming by your house?" Silence stretched across the phone line. "What do you mean?" "Emma mentioned Diana picked her up early from your house last Tuesday. But Diana told me she was at her book club until 8. Rose sighed heavily. "Bobby, how long, Mom?" 3 months. Maybe 4. She started asking me to watch Emma more often. Said she needed personal time to rediscover herself. Rose's voice carried 40 years of watching people make choices. "I didn't want to interfere, but..." "But what?" "Last time she picked Emma up, there was a man in the car. Tall, dark hair. Expensive car. He stayed in the driver's seat, but I could see him. Bobby's grip tightened on the phone. Did Emma see him? No, she was getting her backpack. But Bobby, the way Diana looked at him, I haven't seen her look at anyone that way in years. After hanging up, Bobby sat in his truck for 20 minutes, processing information like he processed construction problems, methodically, completely, with an eye toward solutions that lasted. Diana was having an affair. The garden destruction wasn't about property values or pests. It was about eliminating anything that connected Emma to Bobby's side of the family, anything that represented the values Diana was abandoning. The man in the expensive car was probably Trevor Quinn. Bobby had known Trevor peripherally for years. Quinn Developments was the flashy company that bought historic properties, gutted them, and flipped them for massive profits. Trevor Quinn drove luxury cars, wore Italian suits, and treated construction workers like expendable tools. He was everything Bobby despised about the industry he'd helped build. He was also married to Senator Patricia Quinn, whose family had been in politics for 3 generations. Bobby started his truck and drove across town to the courthouse. He'd built the new wing 5 years ago, knew every clerk, every office, every filing system. Public records were public for a reason. 2 hours later, Bobby walked out with a manila envelope containing property deeds, business licenses, and divorce records. Trevor Quinn's fingerprints were all over half the shadiest real estate deals in the county. More importantly, his divorce from his first wife revealed a pattern of asset hiding and financial manipulation that would make Senator Quinn's political enemies very interested. But Bobby wasn't interested in financial crimes or exposing corruption. That was for people who fought with lawyers and press conferences. Bobby Mills fought with his hands. That evening, Bobby sat at his kitchen table helping Emma with homework while Diana prepared dinner with unusual enthusiasm. She hummed softly, checked her phone frequently, and seemed to glow with an energy Bobby hadn't seen in years. "Daddy, what's a legacy?" Emma asked, pointing to a word in her reading assignment. "A legacy is something you leave behind for people to remember you by," Bobby explained. "Something that shows who you really were." Diana glanced over from the stove. "That's morbid, Bobby." "She's 8. Grandma Rose says our garden was a legacy," Emma continued. "She said every seed we planted would grow up and make new seeds, and those would make more seeds, forever and ever." "That's exactly right, sweetheart." Bobby met Diana's eyes across the kitchen. "Some legacies last forever. Other things." He gestured toward the window overlooking the destroyed garden. "Other things can be bulldozed overnight." For the first time all day, Diana's smile flickered. After Emma went to bed, Bobby sat on the back porch with a beer, studying the manila envelope. Diana was inside, probably texting Trevor Quinn, planning their next meeting. She thought she was being clever, thought Bobby was too busy with work to notice the late meetings, the new clothes, the sudden interest in personal growth. She thought Bobby was the same trusting man who'd married her 20 years ago. She was wrong. Bobby Mills had spent 2 decades building things that lasted, learning that the best structures required perfect planning and flawless execution. He'd learned that cutting corners led to collapse, and betrayal required consequences that were permanent. Diana had destroyed Emma's garden because it represented everything she wanted to eliminate from their daughter's life: stability, family bonds, the idea that some things were worth nurturing for their own sake. Tomorrow morning, Diana would learn that some things, once destroyed, could never be rebuilt. And some people, once betrayed, never forgot. Chapter 2. The Foundation Cracks. Bobby woke at 5 a.m., the same time he'd risen for 20 years. Diana lay beside him, her phone face down on the nightstand, one manicured hand still clutching it even in sleep. She'd been texting until nearly midnight, her thumbs flying across the screen with teenage urgency. In the kitchen, Bobby made coffee and reviewed the documents he'd obtained yesterday. Trevor Quinn's business empire looked impressive from the outside. Luxury offices, high-profile projects, political connections. But Bobby knew construction, knew what happened when foundations were built on sand instead of bedrock. Quinn Developments had defaulted on 3 major projects in the past 5 years. Each time, Trevor had used shell companies and his wife's political connections to escape serious consequences. His MO was simple: seduce wealthy married women, use their resources to fund new projects, then disappear when things got complicated. Diana fit the pattern perfectly. She had access to their joint accounts, She knew Bobby's business contacts, and she was hungry for the sophisticated lifestyle Trevor represented. She probably thought she was special, thought Trevor really loved her. Bobby almost felt sorry for her. Almost. His phone buzzed. A text from his foreman, Miguel Santos, who'd worked with Bobby for 15 years. "Boss, we got problems at the Riverside project. Quinn's guys are saying we're behind schedule, threatening to pull the contract." Bobby drove to the Riverside development, a luxury subdivision where his company was handling infrastructure while Quinn Developments managed the overall project. It was the biggest contract Mills Construction had ever landed, worth nearly $2 million. Trevor Quinn stood near the construction trailer, gesturing angrily at Miguel while 3 of his associates watched. Quinn looked exactly like Bobby had expected. Tall, artificially tan, silver hair slicked back, expensive suit that probably cost more than Miguel made in a month. "Bobby." Trevor's voice carried false friendliness. "Perfect timing. We need to discuss some serious concerns about your crew's progress." Miguel shot Bobby a warning look. In 15 years of working together, they developed a communication system that didn't require words. Miguel's expression said, "This guy's looking for a fight." "What concerns?" Bobby's voice remained level. "Your concrete pour yesterday failed inspection. We're talking about a complete redo, which puts us weeks behind schedule." Trevor smiled the kind of smile that preceded lawsuits. "Naturally, Mills Construction will be responsible for all costs and delays." Bobby walked to the section in question, knowing immediately what he'd find. The concrete was perfectly acceptable, good enough for the luxury homes Trevor was planning to sell for obscene profits. But it wasn't perfect, and in construction, imperfect could be weaponized by someone looking for leverage. "This concrete meets all building codes and specifications," Bobby said calmly. "Maybe for one of your usual projects," Trevor replied. "But Quinn Developments maintains higher standards. Our buyers expect perfection." Bobby understood the game now. Trevor wasn't just stealing his wife. He was destroying his business. It was elegant, really. Ruin Bobby financially, force a divorce settlement that left Diana with everything, then sweep in as her savior. She'd never have to know Trevor had orchestrated her husband's downfall. "I'll have a new inspection done by an independent contractor," Bobby said. "That won't be necessary. I've already made arrangements with Hartley Construction to complete the project." Trevor's smile widened. "They'll start tomorrow." Hartley Construction was owned by Diana's brother, Paul Hartley, a man Bobby had loaned $50,000 to 3 years ago when Paul's previous company went bankrupt. A loan that had never been repaid. The pieces clicked into place. Diana hadn't just been feeding Trevor information about Bobby's business. She'd been actively working to destroy it. Her brother Paul was part of the conspiracy, probably promised a percentage of Quinn Developments once Bobby was eliminated. "You're terminating our contract?" Bobby asked. "Breach of contract due to substandard work," Trevor confirmed. "Your reputation in this town is about to become very interesting, Bobby. I'd suggest you start thinking about career alternatives." Miguel stepped forward, his jaw tight with anger, but Bobby raised a hand to stop him. Violence wouldn't solve this. Violence was what Trevor expected, what he was probably hoping for. A construction worker losing his temper, maybe even getting arrested, would make the story even better. "Miguel, pack up the equipment. We're done here." As they loaded tools into trucks, Miguel pulled Bobby aside. "Boss, this is bullshit. That concrete is perfect. I've been doing this for 20 years. "I know. So what are we gonna do?" Bobby watched Trevor's associates swagger around the construction site like they owned it. Which, legally, they now did. But ownership and control were different things, and Bobby Mills understood the difference better than most. "We're going to build something new," Bobby said. "Something that lasts." That evening, Bobby sat in his home office, door locked, reviewing files on his computer. Diana was downstairs cooking dinner. Actually cooking, not heating up takeout, which meant Trevor was coming over later. She always cooked when she was nervous or excited. Bobby accessed his business accounts, checking balances and reviewing recent transactions. Everything looked normal, but then he noticed something interesting. Diana had been asking more questions about their finances lately, particularly about Bobby's retirement accounts and life insurance policies. She was planning ahead. Bobby opened a new browser window and searched for property records in Barbados, the Cayman Islands, Costa Rica, places where wealthy Americans disappeared when they wanted to start over. It took 2 hours, but he found what he was looking for. Trevor Quinn owned a luxury villa in Costa Rica, purchased through a shell company 6 months ago. The property was worth nearly $3 million, far more than Trevor could afford based on his legitimate income. More importantly, it was registered under a name that wasn't Trevor Quinn. It was registered under the name Thomas Quinlan. A quick search revealed that Thomas Quinlan had been married to a wealthy widow in Arizona 5 years ago. She died in a car accident 18 months later, leaving Quinlan everything. The Arizona police had investigated, found no evidence of foul play, and closed the case. But Bobby found something the Arizona police had missed. Hospital records showing that Mrs. Quinlan had been prescribed medication for a heart condition, medication that became lethal when combined with alcohol. On the night she died, she'd had dinner at an expensive restaurant. The restaurant's records showed she'd ordered wine. Trevor Quinn wasn't just a con artist. He was a killer. Bobby printed everything and added it to his manila envelope. Then he made 3 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator named Ray Duncan, an ex-cop who specialized in insurance fraud. Bobby had used Ray's services before when workers filed suspicious injury claims. The second was to his lawyer, Kevin Walsh, a man who'd handled Bobby's business contracts for 10 years. Kevin owed Bobby a favor. Bobby had testified on Kevin's behalf during a messy divorce that could have cost him his law license. The third call was to his mother. "Mom, I need you to take Emma for a few days. Maybe a week." "Bobby, what's happening?" "Something I should have handled a long time ago. But Emma can't be here when it happens." Rose Mills had raised a son in a world where promises mattered and betrayal had consequences. She didn't ask for details. "I'll pick her up tomorrow after school." "Thanks, Mom." "And Mom, no matter what you hear about me in the next few weeks, remember that Emma comes first. Always." "I know, son. I know." Bobby hung up and stared at the manila envelope containing Trevor Quinn's secrets. Diana thought she was smart, thought she'd found a way to upgrade her life without consequences. She thought Bobby was just another working-class husband who'd roll over when defeated. She was about to learn that Bobby Mills didn't roll over. He rolled forward. Downstairs, Diana was setting the table with their good china, the plates they only used for holidays and special occasions. She'd changed into a black dress Bobby hadn't seen before, and her hair was styled differently, softer, more romantic. "You're dressed up," Bobby observed. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together." "We never do that anymore." Diana's smile was practiced, the kind she used when asking for expensive things. "Maybe we could talk about taking a vacation. Somewhere tropical." "Sounds expensive." "We can afford it. Your business is doing so well." Diana moved closer, trailing her fingers down Bobby's chest. "You work so hard for us. You deserve to relax." Bobby caught her hand, studying her face. This was goodbye, he realized. She was saying goodbye to 20 years of marriage, to the father of her child, to the man who'd given her everything she'd ever asked for. She was saying goodbye because she thought she was taking everything with her. "You know what, Diana? You're right. I do deserve better." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe even fear. But then her phone buzzed, and she was distracted again, reading another message from her future that didn't include Bobby or Emma. "I'll be working late tonight," Bobby said. "Don't wait up." He kissed her forehead, breathing in her expensive perfume, memorizing the moment. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Diana would learn that destroying Emma's garden was the worst mistake she'd ever made. Because Bobby Mills was about to plant some seeds of his own. Seeds that would grow into consequences Diana couldn't even imagine. Chapter 3, the first document. Bobby arrived at his office before dawn, the manila envelope containing Trevor Quinn's secrets locked in his truck's gun safe. He'd spent the night planning, remembering lessons his mother had taught him about patience and his father had taught him about building things that lasted. By 6 a.m., Miguel and the core crew had gathered in the trailer. These were men Bobby had worked with for years. Luis, who could operate any piece of heavy equipment. Jake, whose electrical work was so precise it looked like art. Tom, who could read concrete like others read books. They were more than employees. They were craftsmen who took pride in their work. "Boys, I want you to know that losing the Quinn contract isn't your fault," Bobby began. "The concrete was perfect. The work was perfect. What happened yesterday was about something else entirely." Miguel spoke up. "Boss, we got families. If the company goes under..." "The company isn't going under." but we're going to make some changes. Bobby pulled out copies of new contracts he'd prepared the night before. Every man in this room is getting a 10% raise, effective immediately. And every man in this room is getting a bonus based on company profits. The men exchanged glances. In construction, raises usually came after successful projects, not after losing major contracts. There's a catch, Bobby continued. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Ever. And what we're going to do might make some people in this town very unhappy with us. Jake, a 30-year veteran who'd worked with Bobby's father, leaned forward. What kind of unhappy? The kind where they try to destroy our reputations, maybe even our lives. Bobby met each man's eyes. I won't lie to you. This could get ugly. Anyone who wants out can leave now. Full pay, no hard feelings. Nobody moved. Luis, whose daughter was starting college in the fall, asked quietly, "What did they do to you, boss?" Bobby had hired Luis when the man was fresh out of prison, gave him a chance when nobody else would. Luis had never forgotten that kindness, and Bobby had never regretted that decision. They made it personal, Bobby said simply. They involved my daughter. That changed everything. These men had worked in Bobby's backyard, had attended Emma's birthday parties, had watched her grow up from a toddler who followed them around the construction sites to a bright 8-year-old who knew the names of every tool and could spot quality work from 50 yards away. Emma was their princess too. What do you need us to do? Miguel asked. Bobby spread blueprints across the conference table, not building plans, but detailed maps of every property Trevor Quinn owned or was developing in the county. We're going to build something new, something that shows this town who Trevor Quinn really is. At 9 a.m., Bobby walked into the office of the county building inspector, a man named Frank Morrison who'd been approving Bobby's work for 15 years. Frank was honest, competent, and completely by the book. Exactly the kind of official who hated being manipulated. Bobby, heard about the Quinn situation. That's rough, man. Frank, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Bobby placed a photograph on Frank's desk, a picture of the concrete pour that Trevor had rejected. Is there anything wrong with this work? Frank studied the photo for several minutes, his trained eye examining every detail. This is beautiful work, Bobby. Clean lines, proper aggregation, excellent finish. I'd approve this in a heartbeat. Trevor Quinn claims it failed inspection. Frank's expression darkened. I never inspected that concrete. Quinn's office called and said they were handling their own inspections using private contractors. Private contractors who work for Quinn. Yeah. Frank leaned back in his chair. Bobby, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen every trick in the book. What Quinn did to you? That's not about construction standards. That's about something else. Bobby placed another document on Frank's desk, a complaint form requesting a full investigation of Quinn Development's inspection practices. Would you be willing to look into how many of Quinn's projects have used private inspectors instead of county officials? Frank picked up the form, reading carefully. This could take weeks, maybe months. I've got time. This could also make some powerful people very angry. Quinn's married to a senator. I know. Frank signed the complaint form. I'll start with his current projects and work backward. If Quinn's been bypassing county inspections to hide substandard work, people need to know. At 11 a.m., Bobby met with Ray Duncan, the private investigator, at a diner across town. Ray was a lean man in his 50s, with gray hair and the kind of watchful eyes that missed nothing. He'd been a detective for 20 years before starting his own agency. Interesting reading, Ray said, tapping the folder containing Trevor Quinn's background information. Thomas Quinlan, mysterious deaths, shell companies in Costa Rica. You know what you're suggesting here? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking you to investigate. Bobby, if this guy really is what you think he is, then you're not just dealing with infidelity and business fraud. You're dealing with someone who kills people for money. Then maybe it's time someone stopped him. Ray studied Bobby's face. What exactly do you want me to find? Everything. Financial records, travel patterns, communication with my wife, connections to previous victims. I want to know what Trevor Quinn had for breakfast 3 years ago. That's a lot of work. Expensive work. Bobby slid a check across the table. That's a retainer. There's more where that came from. Ray pocketed the check. I'll need a few days to get started. In the meantime, you should be careful. If Quinn suspects you're investigating him, let him suspect. I'm not hiding. At 1 p.m., Bobby drove to Emma's school. She was sitting under a tree during lunch, reading a book instead of playing with other children. Since the garden's destruction, she'd been quieter, more withdrawn. "Hey, sweetheart." Emma looked up, her face brightening. "Daddy, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to have lunch with my favorite girl." Bobby sat beside her on the grass. "What are you reading?" "It's about plants. Did you know some flowers can grow in the desert where there's hardly any water?" "I didn't know that." "Tell me more." "They're called succulents. They store water in their leaves so they can survive when everything else dies." Emma traced the pictures with her finger. "Grandma Rose says maybe we could plant some in our yard." Bobby felt his chest tighten. Even with her garden destroyed, Emma was still thinking about growing things, still believing in new beginnings. She had her grandmother's optimism and her father's determination, a dangerous combination in the best possible way. Grandma Rose is going to pick you up after school today. You're going to stay with her for a little while." "How long?" "Maybe a week. Is that okay?" Emma nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, she'd already learned that sometimes adults made decisions that children couldn't understand. "Are you and Mommy fighting?" Bobby chose his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to solve. But no matter what happens, I want you to know that you're the most important thing in my life. Always. More important than your company. Much more important. More important than Mommy." The question hit Bobby like a physical blow. Emma was asking because she sensed the truth, that her parents' marriage was over, that everything was about to change. She was asking because she needed to know where she stood in the wreckage. "Emma, you are my heart. You are my legacy. Everything I do for you." She nodded again, satisfied. "Daddy, yeah. When I grow up, I want to build things like you do. But I want to build gardens too. You can build whatever you want, sweetheart. The world is yours." That evening, Bobby sat in his truck outside Diana's yoga studio, watching her emerge with Trevor Quinn. They were trying to be discreet, leaving separately, meeting at his car around the corner. But Bobby had been expecting this, had been watching their patterns for weeks. Diana looked radiant in a way she hadn't in years. She laughed at something Trevor said, touched his arm with intimate familiarity. They were comfortable together, natural. This wasn't a new affair. It was a relationship that had been building for months, maybe longer. Trevor opened the car door for her, playing the gentleman. He was handsome in an obvious way, successful in a flashy way. He represented everything Diana thought she wanted: sophistication, wealth, excitement. He also represented everything Bobby was about to destroy. Bobby's phone buzzed. A text from Diana. "Running late tonight. Don't wait up." Another lie. Another small betrayal added to the mountain of larger ones. Bobby drove home to their empty house, poured himself a whiskey, and sat at his kitchen table with the manila envelope. Tomorrow, he'd start implementing his plan. Tomorrow, he'd begin building something new from the ashes of his marriage. Tonight, he'd mourn the woman Diana used to be, the young teacher he'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, the excited new mother who'd cried when Emma took her first steps, the wife who'd once made him believe in forever. That woman was gone, replaced by someone Bobby didn't recognize, someone who could destroy a child's garden without remorse. But if Diana thought Bobby would quietly disappear, she was wrong. Bobby Mills built things to last, and he was about to build the most permanent thing of all: consequences that would follow Diana and Trevor Quinn for the rest of their lives. Starting tomorrow morning, when Diana would turn pale reading the first document Bobby had prepared for her. The document that would begin her education in exactly what kind of man she'd betrayed. Chapter 4. The Trap Sets. Bobby woke before dawn to find Diana's side of the bed empty and cold. She hadn't come home. Her overnight bag was gone, along with her passport, details Bobby had been tracking for weeks. She was preparing for something bigger than an affair. She was preparing to disappear. The document Bobby had prepared lay on the kitchen counter, sealed in a manila envelope with Diana's name written in his careful block letters. Inside was a copy of Trevor Quinn's real estate holdings in Costa Rica, along with newspaper clippings about Thomas Quinlan and his dead wife in Arizona. But that was just the appetizer. By 7 a.m., Bobby was in his office trailer, coordinating with his crew. They had new projects lined up, smaller jobs, but steady work that would keep them busy while Bobby's larger plan unfolded. Miguel had questions about supply orders, and Luis needed approval for equipment rental. "Boss," Jake called from the doorway. "You got a visitor." Trevor Quinn stood outside the trailer, no longer bothering with false friendliness. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed despite the early hour, and his smile carried the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. "Bobby, we need to talk." Bobby stepped outside, letting Trevor see the full size and scope of his operation. Mills Construction might not have Quinn's political connections, but it had something more valuable: the respect of every tradesman in 3 counties. "About what?" "About your wife." Trevor's smile widened. "Diana's been telling me some interesting things about your financial situation. Apparently, Mills Construction isn't as successful as it appears." Bobby remained silent, letting Trevor reveal his hand. "See, Diana has access to your business accounts, your tax records, everything. And what she's found is a company that's been struggling for years, hiding debt, probably committing fraud to stay afloat." Trevor stepped closer. "Now, I'd hate for that information to become public. Bad for business, you know." "What do you want?" "A clean divorce. Diana gets the house, half the business assets, and primary custody of Emma. You don't contest anything, don't make waves, and I'll make sure your little accounting irregularities stay private." Bobby felt his crew watching from inside the trailer. Miguel's hand was resting near a crowbar, ready to defend his boss if needed. But this wasn't a fight that could be won with violence. "And if I refuse?" "Then Diana files for divorce anyway, along with a complaint to the state licensing board about your business practices. You'll lose everything: company, house, daughter, freedom. Fraud charges are serious business." Trevor was good. He'd constructed an elegant trap using Diana's inside knowledge and Bobby's own success against him. The business records Diana had access to could be interpreted as evidence of financial irregularities if viewed by the right prosecutor. A vindictive ex-wife's testimony would be devastating. "I need time to think about it." "You have 48 hours. Diana's already moved out, by the way. She's staying somewhere safe while she considers her options." After Trevor left, Bobby sat in his truck, processing the threat. Diana and Trevor had been planning this for months, probably longer. They'd analyzed his business records, identified potential vulnerabilities, constructed a legal strategy designed to destroy him completely. They'd also made one critical mistake. They'd assumed Bobby Mills was the same trusting man who'd built his company through hard work and honest dealing. They'd assumed he'd fight fair, follow rules, respect boundaries. They were wrong. Bobby drove to his bank, where he'd been a customer for 20 years. The manager, Susan Chun, had financed every major purchase Bobby had ever made: his first truck, his house, his construction equipment. "Bobby, how's Emma? Still building gardens with her grandmother?" "Actually, that's part of why I'm here." Bobby placed a folder on Susan's desk. "I need to restructure some accounts. Business reasons." What Bobby didn't tell Susan was that he'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, ever since he'd noticed Diana's increasing interest in their finances. He'd quietly moved assets, established new accounts, created a financial structure that Diana couldn't access or trace. The business records Diana thought she controlled contained only what Bobby wanted her to see. "I also need to discuss a loan application," Bobby continued. "Mills Construction is expanding into commercial development. We'll need significant capital." Susan reviewed the preliminary paperwork Bobby provided. "This is ambitious, Bobby. You're talking about competing directly with companies like Quinn Developments. Sometimes competition is necessary." By noon, Bobby had visited 3 more banks, 2 law firms, and a commercial real estate office. By evening, he'd established the foundation for a new company, Mills Development Corporation, with enough capital backing to bid on major projects throughout the region. Trevor Quinn was about to discover that Bobby Mills wasn't just a construction worker who'd gotten lucky. He was a businessman who understood that in capitalism, money was just another tool. And Bobby Mills knew how to use tools. That evening, Bobby drove to his mother's house to have dinner with Emma. Rose had prepared Emma's favorite meal: grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. And they ate at the small kitchen table where Bobby had done his homework 30 years ago. "Daddy, Grandma Rose showed me pictures of the garden you and her built when you were little," Emma said, her face animated with excitement. "She said you planted a whole apple tree by yourself." "That tree is still growing in Grandma's backyard," Bobby replied. "Want to see it after dinner?" They walked outside together, Emma's small hand in Bobby's, to the apple tree that now stood 20 feet tall. Its branches were heavy with fruit, and its roots had spread deep into the soil. "Some things take time to grow," Rose said, joining them in the yard. But when they're planted right, with good soil and proper care, they last forever. Bobby understood the lesson. His mother had been teaching Emma about patience and permanence, about the difference between quick fixes and lasting solutions. "Grandma, can we plant another tree?" Emma asked. "Maybe at Daddy's house." "We'll see, sweetheart. Sometimes we have to clear away old growth before we can plant something new." That night, Bobby sat in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by planning documents and legal papers. His phone buzzed constantly, Diana calling, texting, probably wondering why he hadn't responded to Trevor's ultimatum. He didn't answer. Instead, he called Ray Duncan. "I've got preliminary findings," Ray said without preamble. "Your friend Thomas Quinlan has been very busy. 3 wives, all wealthy, all dead within 2 years of marriage. Arizona police missed it because they only looked at the most recent case." "What about the others?" "Car accident in Nevada 5 years ago. Drowning in Florida 3 years before that. All ruled accidental. All convenient for Mr. Quinlan's bank account. Evidence. Circumstantial, but compelling. Insurance policies taken out shortly before each death. Witness statements that don't quite add up. Financial records showing large transfers just before the accidents." Bobby felt cold satisfaction settling in his chest. "What about Diana?" "He's following the same pattern. Expensive gifts, luxury trips, promises of a new life together. Your wife has already signed preliminary papers transferring power of attorney to Quinn for certain financial matters. She's giving him legal control of our assets?" "Partial control. Enough to access accounts, make investments, basically steal everything without technically committing theft. Very clever. Not clever enough." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Bobby, I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information?" Bobby stared out his childhood window at the apple tree he'd planted with his mother's help. The tree that had grown strong and tall because it had been planted with patience, nurtured with care, and given time to develop deep roots. "I'm going to build something that lasts," Bobby said. The next morning, Diana would find the first document Bobby had prepared for her. She'd learned that her husband wasn't the naive construction worker she thought she was manipulating. She'd learned that Bobby Mills had been building his own trap, one that had been years in the making, one that would capture not just her and Trevor, but everyone who'd helped them betray the man who'd given them everything. Starting with Diana's brother Paul, whose construction company was about to lose every contract it had ever secured through Bobby's recommendations. The trap was set. Now Bobby just had to wait for them to walk into it. Chapter 5. The Pressure Builds. Diana's scream echoed through the empty house at 6:47 a.m. Bobby was already at his office when his security system sent him the alert. He watched through hidden cameras as Diana discovered the manila envelope on the kitchen counter, read its contents, and called Trevor in a panic. The documents Bobby had left were carefully chosen. Photos of Trevor's Costa Rican villa, newspaper clippings about Thomas Quinlan's dead wives, and Diana's own signed power of attorney papers that she thought were private. But the most devastating item was a simple printout of their joint bank accounts that now showed a balance of exactly $1. Bobby had moved their money to new accounts Diana couldn't access, accounts established in Emma's name with Rose Mills as trustee. 20 years of their marriage was now held in trust for their daughter's future. Diana couldn't touch a penny without Bobby's permission. His phone rang. "Bobby, you bastard. What have you done?" "Good morning, Diana. I see you found my little gift. You can't do this. That money is half mine. Actually, it's not. Those accounts were opened with my name only, funded entirely by my company's profits. Legally, you never had any claim to them." Bobby's voice remained calm, while Diana's grew more frantic. "The house, however, is jointly owned. Feel free to live there. Of course, without access to any money, you might have trouble paying the mortgage, utilities, insurance. This is illegal. I'll sue you for everything." "With what money?" "Your lawyer is expensive, Diana. Trevor's lawyer is even more expensive. And I have a feeling Trevor's going to be very busy with his own legal problems soon." Through his security cameras, Bobby watched Diana frantically searching through papers, probably looking for documents that proved her financial claims. She wouldn't find them. Bobby had been preparing for this moment for months. "What do you want?" Diana's voice cracked with desperation. "I want you to understand something very important," Bobby said. "You destroyed Emma's garden because you thought it was just dirt and plants. But that garden represented 20 years of my life. Building something, nurturing it, watching it grow. You killed it in one morning because it wasn't convenient for your new plans. Bobby, please. Now you're going to learn what it feels like to watch something you've built get destroyed overnight. Bobby hung up and immediately called Paul Hartley, Diana's brother. Paul's construction company had been surviving on contracts Bobby had recommended to him, work that Paul's incompetent crew routinely botched before Bobby's people quietly fixed their mistakes. Paul, it's Bobby. We need to talk. Bobby, man, I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry, but Diana's my sister, you know? I have to support her. I understand family loyalty. That's why I'm calling to give you a heads up. About what? I'm terminating my business relationship with Hartley Construction, effective immediately. I'm also withdrawing my recommendations to every contractor who's been using your services. Silence stretched across the phone line. Paul's company relied entirely on Bobby's referrals and oversight. Without that support, Hartley Construction would collapse within weeks. You can't do that. We have contracts. Check your contracts, Paul. Every one of them includes a clause allowing the primary contractor to terminate for cause. Substandard work is cause. Bobby, come on. Don't do this to me because you're mad at Diana. This isn't about Diana. This is about Emma. Bobby's voice hardened. My 8-year-old daughter watched her garden get bulldozed because your sister wanted to hurt me. You chose your side, Paul. Now live with the consequences. Bobby's next call was to Frank Morrison, the county building inspector. Frank, it's Bobby. Any progress on that Quinn investigation? Actually, yes. I've been reviewing Quinn's projects from the past 2 years, and I'm finding some interesting patterns. Private inspections that don't match county standards, materials substitutions that weren't properly documented, safety violations that were overlooked. Anything actionable? Probably. But Bobby, there's something else. I got a call this morning from the state licensing board. Someone filed a complaint against Mills Construction, alleging financial irregularities and fraud. Bobby had been expecting this. Diana? The complaint came from Diana Mills and Paul Hartley. They're claiming you've been manipulating contracts to hide business losses, using substandard materials, falsifying inspection reports. All lies. I know that. Anyone who's worked with you knows that. But the state board has to investigate anyway. They want to see your books, interview your crew, review your recent projects. Bobby smiled. This was exactly what he'd hoped would happen. Tell them I'll cooperate fully. Complete transparency. Bobby, aren't you worried? Even false accusations can damage your reputation. Frank, I've been in business for 20 years. My books are clean, my work is perfect, and my crew will testify to my character. Diana and Paul just handed me the opportunity to prove, in a court of law, that they're liars. What about Quinn's involvement? Trevor Quinn made the mistake of threatening me yesterday. He told me Diana had evidence of fraud in my business records. The only way she could have that evidence is if Quinn helped her fabricate it. Frank was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. You're saying they created false evidence to blackmail you? I'm saying they just committed conspiracy and extortion, both felonies. And they did it in writing. By noon, Bobby had received calls from 6 different clients, all asking about the rumors circulating regarding Mills Construction's financial problems. Word traveled fast in the construction industry, and Diana's complaint to the state licensing board was already generating gossip. Bobby handled each call the same way. Complete honesty about the situation, an invitation to review his books personally, and a promise that Mills Construction would continue operating at the highest standards regardless of his personal problems. 3 clients canceled their contracts. 2 decided to wait and see how the investigation unfolded. One client, Sarah Martinez, who owned a chain of successful restaurants, called to offer Bobby additional work. I've known you for 10 years, Bobby. You built my first restaurant when I was nobody, gave me credit when the banks wouldn't. If someone's trying to destroy your reputation with lies, then I want to help you fight back. Sarah's loyalty reminded Bobby why he'd spent 20 years building relationships instead of just buildings. In construction, reputation was everything, and Bobby's reputation was built on decades of keeping promises. That afternoon, Bobby drove to the county courthouse for a meeting with Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, Kevin Walsh's daughter, a prosecutor who specialized in white-collar crime. Mr. Mills, my father says you have information about a potential conspiracy case? Bobby placed a thick folder on Jennifer's desk. Trevor Quinn, also known as Thomas Quinlan, has been defrauding wealthy women for years. He's currently targeting my wife, with the help of my brother-in-law, and they filed false complaints against my business to pressure me into accepting an unfavorable divorce settlement. Jennifer reviewed the documents. Evidence of Trevor's multiple identities, his pattern of marriages to wealthy women who died under suspicious circumstances, the timeline of his relationship with Diana, and copies of the threatening conversation Trevor had recorded on his phone. This is comprehensive. How long have you been investigating this man? 3 days. Jennifer looked up, surprised. 3 days? This looks like months of work. I'm motivated. Mr. Mills, if even half of this is accurate, we're talking about serial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, possibly even murder. Are you prepared for what might happen when we start investigating these allegations? I'm prepared for anything except letting Trevor Quinn destroy my family. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying Bobby with the sharp eyes of a prosecutor who'd learned to read people's motivations. Your wife will likely face charges too. Conspiracy, filing false reports, possibly accessory to fraud. I understand. Your daughter will know that both her parents are criminals. Bobby felt that like a physical blow, but his expression didn't change. My daughter will know that her father protected her from people who would have destroyed her life for money. Jennifer made notes in the file margin. I'll need to coordinate with Arizona and Florida authorities regarding the suspicious deaths. That could take weeks. I have time. Mr. Mills, I have to ask, what's your endgame here? What do you really want? Bobby thought about Emma sitting under the tree at school, reading about plants that could survive in the desert. About his mother teaching him that some things, once planted properly, lasted forever. About the apple tree in Rose's backyard that still produced fruit 20 years after a boy had planted it with his own hands. I want Trevor Quinn in prison for the rest of his life. I want Diana to understand that actions have consequences. And I want my daughter to grow up knowing that her father fought for her when it mattered. Even if it destroys your marriage permanently. My marriage was destroyed the morning Diana bulldozed Emma's garden. Everything since then has just been cleanup. That evening, Bobby had dinner with Emma at Rose's house. Emma was excited about a school project on family trees, and she wanted to include her garden in the presentation. Daddy, can I tell everyone about the garden we're going to plant together? What garden is that, sweetheart? The one you promised. After we clean up the old one. Emma's eyes shone with 8-year-old optimism. Grandma Rose says sometimes you have to pull up the weeds before the good plants can grow. Bobby glanced at his mother, who was watching him with the patient expression of someone who'd spent decades watching him learn life's hard lessons. That's exactly right, Em. Sometimes cleaning up takes longer than you expect, but the new garden is always better than the old one. Will Mommy help us plant the new garden? Bobby chose his words carefully. I don't think Mommy is interested in gardening anymore. Emma nodded solemnly. That's okay. We can plant enough flowers for everyone. That night, as Emma slept in Bobby's old bedroom, Rose and Bobby sat on the back porch drinking coffee and watching the stars. You know this is going to get worse before it gets better, Rose said quietly. I know. Diana might go to prison. Emma might lose her mother. Emma lost her mother the day Diana chose Trevor Quinn over her own daughter. Rose was quiet for a long moment. Your father would have done the same thing. You think he'd approve? I think he'd be proud that his son knows the difference between building something and tearing it down. Rose reached over and squeezed Bobby's hand. Just remember that Emma needs to see you building, not just destroying. Bobby understood. The trap he'd set for Diana and Trevor was elaborate and devastating, but it was essentially destructive. Emma needed to see her father creating something positive from the wreckage of their family. Tomorrow, Bobby would start building something new, not just a business or a legal case, but a future where Emma could grow up safe from people who would use her as leverage in their games. A future where gardens could grow without fear of being destroyed by people who didn't understand their value. The pressure was building on Diana and Trevor, but Bobby's real work was just beginning. Chapter 6. The Net Tightens. Trevor Quinn's world began unraveling at exactly 9:15 a.m. when FBI agents walked into his luxury office building. Bobby watched from across the street as federal investigators carried out boxes of documents while Trevor's employees gathered on the sidewalk, confused and frightened. Ray Duncan had been busy. The private investigators' contacts and law enforcement had fast-tracked the multi-state investigation into Thomas Quinlan's suspicious activities. Arizona police reopened their file on Mrs. Quinlan's death. Florida authorities began reviewing the drowning case, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit started tracing Quinn's shell companies and offshore accounts. Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "This is insane. Trevor's being investigated for murder. You have to stop this." He didn't respond. Diana still didn't understand that this wasn't Bobby's vendetta. It was Trevor's past catching up with him. Bobby had simply accelerated the timeline. Miguel appeared beside Bobby's truck. "Boss, you see the news?" "What news?" "Channel 7 is calling it the Costa Rica connection. They're saying Quinn might be responsible for multiple deaths across several states." Miguel grinned with savage satisfaction. "They're also saying his wife, the senator, had no idea about his real identity." Senator Patricia Quinn's political career was collateral damage Bobby hadn't anticipated, but he felt no sympathy. A senator who couldn't investigate her own husband's background didn't deserve public trust. Bobby's phone rang. Jennifer Walsh, the prosecutor. "Mr. Mills, we have a problem. Diana and her brother have hired Clayton Rivers." Bobby knew the name. Rivers was the most expensive criminal defense attorney in the state, famous for getting wealthy clients acquitted on technicalities. His fees started at $50,000. Where did Diana get that kind of money? That's what we're trying to figure out. Rivers' retainer was paid in cash, which suggests someone with significant liquid assets is backing her defense. Bobby understood immediately. Trevor had been preparing for this possibility, probably had escaped money hidden in accounts Diana could access. Even facing federal investigation, he was still trying to protect his investment in Diana. What does this mean for the case? It means Rivers will try to portray Diana as an innocent victim manipulated by Quinn. He'll argue she had no knowledge of Quinn's criminal activities and was simply a woman trapped in an abusive marriage seeking help from a sympathetic friend. And the false complaints against my business? Rivers will claim Diana was acting on Quinn's advice, that she genuinely believed the financial irregularities were real. Without solid evidence of intentional fraud, she might walk away with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. It's possible. Bobby hung up and sat in his truck, processing this development. He'd underestimated Diana's survival instincts and Trevor's preparation. They'd planned for the possibility of exposure and had resources in place to minimize consequences. But Bobby had planned for this too. He drove to his bank, where Susan Chun was waiting with documents Bobby had prepared weeks ago. "Susan, I need to activate the trust fund transfer we discussed. All of it. Every penny. I want Diana's divorce attorney to discover that there are no marital assets to claim. Everything goes to Emma's trust fund, managed by my mother until Emma turns 25. Susan processed the paperwork, legally transferring Bobby's entire net worth, nearly $2 million, into an irrevocable trust for Emma's benefit. Under Pennsylvania law, trust funds established for a child's welfare couldn't be claimed in divorce proceedings. Diana would get nothing. Bobby's next stop was his lawyer's office, where Kevin Walsh was reviewing the state licensing board's investigation into Mills Construction. "Good news and bad news," Kevin began. "The bad news is that the state board is taking the complaint seriously. They want to interview your entire crew, review every project from the past 5 years, and audit your financial records." "What's the good news?" "The good news is that Paul Hartley is an idiot. He submitted falsified documents as evidence against you. Invoices for materials you supposedly purchased but never used, inspection reports that don't match county records, financial statements that contradict bank records." Kevin spread the documents across his desk. "Bobby, these forgeries are so obvious that a first-year law student could spot them. Paul either didn't understand that state investigators would verify everything, or he panicked and did sloppy work." "What does that mean?" "It means Paul just committed perjury and filing false reports, both felonies. The state board's investigation will now focus on who helped him fabricate these documents and why." Bobby studied the forged papers, recognizing Trevor's handiwork in their sophistication. Trevor had probably created the documents himself, not trusting Paul to do them properly, but hadn't considered that state investigators would cross-reference everything. "Kevin, I need you to file a civil lawsuit against Paul Hartley, Diana Mills, and Trevor Quinn for conspiracy, defamation, and business interference. That's going to be expensive. Civil litigation can drag on for years. I don't care about the money. I care about creating a legal record of their conspiracy." Kevin made notes in his file. Bobby, I have to ask, how far are you planning to take this? These people's lives are being destroyed. Their lives are being destroyed by their own choices. I'm just making sure they face consequences. That afternoon, Bobby met with Emma at her school, where she was participating in a science fair project about plant resilience. She'd created a display showing how different plants adapted to harsh conditions: desert succulents that stored water, alpine flowers that survived freezing temperatures, weeds that thrived in poor soil. Daddy, look. I grew these from seeds Grandma Rose gave me. Emma pointed to small pots containing tiny green shoots. They're going to be flowers next spring. They're beautiful, sweetheart. The teacher said I could plant them in the school garden if I wanted, but I want to wait and plant them in our garden when we fix it. Bobby knelt down to Emma's level, studying her earnest face. At 8 years old, she still believed in happy endings, still trusted that adults would fix problems and make things better. Em, I need to tell you something important. Mommy is probably going to have to go away for a while. Because of the man in the expensive car? Bobby was startled. You know about him? I saw him pick up Mommy from Grandma Rose's house. She told me he was just a friend, but she looked at him the way princesses look at princes in movies. Emma's voice was matter of fact, the way children accepted adult complications they didn't fully understand. Is he a bad man? Yes, sweetheart. He's a very bad man. Is Mommy in trouble because of him? Bobby chose his words carefully. Mommy made some bad choices. Now she has to face the consequences of those choices. Emma nodded solemnly. Like when I broke Grandma's vase and had to do extra chores to pay for a new one? Exactly like that. But sometimes adult consequences are bigger than extra chores. Will she go to jail? I don't know, Em. Maybe. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the resilience Bobby had come to recognize as her defining characteristic. Daddy, if Mommy goes to jail, will I still get to see her? If that's what you want, yes. And will you still be my daddy no matter what happens? Always. Forever. No matter what. Emma smiled and returned to her science project, satisfied with Bobby's answers. She had the emotional strength to handle whatever came next, Bobby realized. She'd inherited Rose's optimism and Bobby's determination, creating a foundation that could survive any storm. That evening, Bobby received a call from Ray Duncan with an update on the federal investigation. They found the smoking gun in Quinn's office, Ray reported. Financial records showing systematic fraud dating back 10 years, forged documents for property purchases, correspondence with multiple women who fit the pattern of wealthy targets. What about Diana? Her name appears in recent files, along with detailed financial information about you, your business, and your assets. There's also a timeline for something called Phase 3, which appears to involve Diana divorcing you and relocating to Costa Rica. Phase 3. Quinn's exit strategy. Marry the mark, liquidate their assets, eliminate any obstacles, then disappear to a non-extradition country with the money. Bobby felt cold understanding settle in his chest. Eliminate obstacles. What kind of obstacles? The kind that might involve an ex-husband who could cause problems, or a child who might complicate the new identity. Bobby's hands tightened on the phone. Trevor hadn't just been planning to steal Diana and Bobby's money. He'd been planning to eliminate Bobby and Emma entirely. The garden destruction hadn't been about property values or pests. It had been a test, a way to measure Bobby's response to provocation. If Bobby had accepted the loss quietly, Trevor would have known he could escalate without resistance. Ray, I need everything you can find about Quinn's previous victims. Specifically, I need to know if any of them had children and what happened to those children. Bobby, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Trevor Quinn wasn't just planning to steal my money. I think he was planning to kill my family. The next morning, Bobby would implement the final phase of his own plan, one that would ensure Trevor Quinn never had the opportunity to hurt another family. Diana thought she was fighting for her freedom. She was actually fighting for her life. Chapter 7. The Revelation. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Bobby answered on the first ring, already knowing it was bad news. Mr. Mills? This is Detective Sarah Kim with the Arizona State Police. We need to discuss Trevor Quinn immediately. Bobby sat up in bed, fully alert. What happened? We reopened the investigation into Mrs. Quinlan's death based on your evidence. What we found. Detective Kim paused. Mr. Mills, we found bodies. Bodies? 3 graves on property Quinn owned outside Phoenix. The victims appear to be children, ages 6 to 10. We're still working on identification, but preliminary evidence suggests these children belong to Quinn's previous victims. Bobby felt the world tilt sideways. Trevor hadn't just been killing wealthy women. He'd been murdering their children to eliminate witnesses and complications. Detective, my daughter. Is Emma currently with you? She's with my mother. They're safe. Keep them that way. Quinn is officially considered armed and extremely dangerous. We've issued federal warrants, but he's disappeared. His last known location was your area. Bobby was already getting dressed. What about my wife? Diana Mills is missing too. Her phone went dead yesterday evening. We think Quinn may have taken her with him. Taken her or... we don't know. But Mr. Mills, based on what we've uncovered, Quinn typically eliminates accomplices when they become liabilities. Your wife may be in extreme danger. After hanging up, Bobby called his mother immediately. Mom, I'm coming to get Emma. We need to leave town for a few days. Bobby, what's happening? Trevor Quinn is a serial killer. He's killed children, Mom. Emma's not safe while he's free. Rose's voice became steel. We'll be ready. Bobby's next call was to Miguel. I need the crew at my house in 30 minutes. Bring tools. What kind of tools? The kind that protect families. When Bobby arrived at his mother's house, he found Rose loading a shotgun with the competence of someone who'd grown up on a farm. Emma was still asleep, unaware that her world had shifted into a nightmare. She doesn't know, Rose said quietly. I thought you should be the one to tell her. Bobby looked at his sleeping daughter, her face peaceful in the early morning light. At 8 years old, she'd already lost her garden, her home stability, and effectively her mother. Now she might lose her life because Diana had chosen a monster. We'll tell her when we're somewhere safe, Bobby decided. Right now, we just need to move. Miguel and the crew arrived as Bobby was loading Emma's belongings into his truck. These were men who'd worked with Bobby for years, who understood that loyalty meant showing up when called, no questions asked. Boss, what do you need? Miguel asked. I need you to watch my house. Quinn might come looking for us. If he shows up. Bobby handed Miguel his spare key. Make sure he doesn't leave. Miguel studied Bobby's face and nodded grimly. We understand. Bobby, Emma, and Rose drove to a cabin Bobby owned in the mountains, a property he'd bought years ago as an investment but had always planned to use as a family retreat. It was remote, defensible, and completely off the grid. Emma woke up during the drive, confused by the early hour and strange circumstances. Daddy? Where are we going? We're taking a little vacation, sweetheart. What about school? You'll miss a few days. We'll make it up later. Bobby spent the day fortifying the cabin while Rose entertained Emma with cooking projects and nature walks. He checked security systems, loaded weapons, and established communication protocols with local law enforcement. By evening, news reports were calling it the Quinlan murders. Trevor's photograph was on every station, along with details about the Arizona graves and the multi-state investigation. Diana's picture appeared alongside his, labeled as missing and possibly endangered. Bobby watched the coverage with grim satisfaction. Trevor Quinn's carefully constructed identity was being demolished on national television. Every detail of his crimes was being exposed. Every victim was being remembered. Every lie was being revealed. But Trevor was still free. Emma fell asleep early, exhausted by the day's disruptions. Rose sat beside Bobby on the cabin's porch, both of them armed and alert. You think he'll come after her? Rose asked. I think Trevor Quinn is a predator who's been cornered. Cornered predators are unpredictable. What about Diana? Bobby had been avoiding that question all day. I think Diana is already dead. Quinn doesn't leave witnesses. Rose was quiet for a moment. Emma's going to need counseling. Therapy. A lot of support. She'll have it. Whatever she needs. She's going to ask about her mother eventually. What will you tell her? Bobby stared into the darkness beyond the cabin's lights. I'll tell her that some people make choices that can't be undone, and that sometimes protecting the people you love means accepting that others can't be saved. At 11:30 p.m., Bobby's phone rang. The caller ID showed Diana's number. Diana? Bobby. Her voice was weak, frightened. Oh God, Bobby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about everything. Where are you? I don't know. Some kind of warehouse. Bobby, Trevor. He's not who I thought he was. He's insane. Diana, listen to me carefully. Are you hurt? Not yet. But he's planning something. He keeps talking about loose ends that need to be tied up. Diana's voice broke. He's going to kill me, Bobby. And then he's going to come for Emma. No, he's not. I won't let that happen. Bobby, there's something you need to know. Trevor has been planning this for over a year. He researched our family, our finances, everything. He chose me specifically because... Diana sobbed. Because he wanted to hurt you. What do you mean? He knows about your father. About the construction accident that killed him. Trevor was involved, Bobby. His company was the one that cut safety corners, that caused the accident. He's been planning revenge against your family for 20 years. Bobby felt the truth hit him like a physical blow. Trevor Quinn hadn't just targeted Diana randomly. He'd orchestrated everything as revenge against the Mills family. The affair, the business sabotage, the threats against Emma. All of it was payback for Bobby's father exposing safety violations that cost Quinn's company millions in fines. Diana, where exactly are you? The old Riverside Warehouse District. Building 47. Bobby, don't come here. He's waiting for you. This is a trap. I know it's a trap. Then why? Because sometimes walking into a trap is the only way to end it. Bobby hung up and checked his weapons. He had everything he needed. Rifle, handgun, knife, and 20 years of construction experience that had taught him how to move through buildings quietly and efficiently. Rose appeared in the doorway. You're going after him. I have to. As long as Trevor's alive, Emma will never be safe. The police. Don't know the terrain like I do. Don't have the motivation I have. Bobby kissed his mother's forehead. If I don't come back, Emma gets everything. Raise her to be strong. Bobby, raise her to be strong, but teach her to be kind. Don't let what happened to Diana poison her against love. Rose nodded, understanding that this might be goodbye. Your father would be proud. My father would understand that some things are worth dying for. Bobby drove toward the Riverside Warehouse District, knowing he was walking into Trevor Quinn's final trap. But Trevor had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed Bobby would come alone, desperate and unprepared. Instead, Bobby Mills was coming as himself, a man who built things to last, who kept promises, who protected his family at any cost. Trevor Quinn was about to learn the difference between a predator and a protector, and only one of them would survive the night. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. The Riverside Warehouse District stretched along the river like a graveyard of industrial ambitions. Building 47 stood at the center, a 3-story brick structure that Bobby's crew had renovated 5 years ago. He knew every entrance, every blind spot, every structural weakness. Trevor had chosen the location carefully, isolated, multiple escape routes, plenty of places to hide. But he'd made the mistake of choosing a building Bobby knew better than anyone alive. Bobby parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, using shadows and construction debris for cover. His phone vibrated with text messages from Miguel. Boss, cops are all over your house. FBI too. They know Quinn's planning something. Good. Let them come. But this would be over before they arrived. Bobby entered Building 47 through a service entrance he'd installed during the renovation, a hidden door designed for maintenance access that wasn't shown on any official blueprints. The interior was dark except for battery-powered work lights that cast harsh shadows across empty spaces. Bobby, Trevor's voice echoed from the second floor. I know you're here. Come join us. Bobby moved carefully through the ground floor, checking corners and clearance areas. His construction experience served him well. He knew how sound traveled through the building, where weak floorboards might betray his position, which routes offered the best tactical advantage. On the second floor, Bobby found them. Diana sat tied to a chair in the center of the main room, her face bruised and her clothes torn. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, but she was alive and conscious. Trevor stood behind her, one hand resting casually on her shoulder, the other holding a pistol. There's my old friend. Trevor smiled with genuine pleasure. I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve. Bobby remained in the doorway, rifle ready but not yet aimed. Let her go, Trevor. This is between us. Actually, it's between our families. Your father cost me everything 20 years ago, Bobby. Everything. Trevor's smile faded. Edward Mills testified that Quinn Construction deliberately ignored safety protocols to save money. His testimony led to federal investigations, criminal charges, the complete destruction of my father's company. Your father's company killed 17 men because of criminal negligence. My father's company employed 300 people. Families depended on us. Trevor's voice rose with old rage. Edward Mills destroyed all of that with his self-righteous testimony. He chose dead men over living families. Bobby understood now. Trevor's entire life had been shaped by hatred for the Mills family. The murders, the fraud, the elaborate revenge plot, all of it stemmed from a 20-year-old grudge against Bobby's father. So you decided to destroy my family. I decided to give you the same gift your father gave me, the complete annihilation of everything you love. Trevor gestured to Diana. Your wife was surprisingly easy to seduce. All it took was attention and expensive gifts. She never even suspected she was being manipulated. Diana sobbed quietly, finally understanding the scope of her betrayal. She'd thought she was choosing love over duty, but she'd actually been choosing a predator over her own family. The garden destruction was just the beginning, Trevor continued. I wanted you to feel helpless, to watch something you'd built with love get destroyed overnight. Just like your father destroyed everything I'd built. My father saved lives by exposing your family's crimes. Your father was a self-righteous fool who chose principles over pragmatism. Just like you. Trevor raised his pistol. But don't worry, Bobby. I'm not going to kill you quickly. First, I'm going to kill Diana while you watch. Then I'm going to find Emma and kill her too. The Mills family line ends tonight. Bobby's rifle snapped up, but Trevor was already moving, using Diana as a human shield. Ah, one shot from you, and Diana dies immediately. Then I disappear and hunt down your daughter at my leisure. Bobby kept his rifle trained on Trevor, but couldn't get a clean shot. Diana had nothing to do with what happened 20 years ago. Emma definitely had nothing to do with it. Neither did I. I was 16 years old when your father destroyed my family. But I still paid the price, didn't I? Trevor's face contorted with decades of suppressed rage. I spent my entire adult life rebuilding what Edward Mills destroyed. Every dollar I stole, every woman I killed, every crime I committed, all of it was payment toward this debt. You chose to become a monster. Nobody forced that on you. Your father forced it on me by leaving me no other choice. Bobby saw the madness in Trevor's eyes now, the complete disconnection from reality that came from years of justifying increasingly horrific actions. Trevor genuinely believed he was the victim, that everything he'd done was justified by his childhood trauma. Trevor, listen to me. This ends now. Let Diana go, and we can settle this between us. Man to man. Oh, we're going to settle it. But first, Diana needs to understand the consequences of betraying her family. Trevor pressed the gun against Diana's temple. Tell Bobby goodbye, darling. Wait. Diana's voice cracked with desperation. Trevor, please. I'll do anything. I'll go with you to Costa Rica. I'll help you disappear, anything. Trevor laughed. Diana, you still don't understand. I never wanted you for yourself. You were just a tool to hurt Bobby, a means to an end. But I love you. And I love watching Bobby's face as he realizes he can't save you. Bobby made his choice. He fired. The bullet caught Trevor in the shoulder, spinning him away from Diana, but not killing him. Trevor's pistol discharged into the ceiling as he fell, and Diana's chair toppled backward, leaving her tied but out of the immediate line of fire. Trevor rolled behind a support pillar, wounded but still dangerous. You missed, Bobby. No, I didn't. Bobby had been aiming for the shoulder. He needed Trevor alive for what came next. I'm bleeding pretty bad here. Trevor called out. But I've got enough left in me to finish this. Bobby moved carefully through the maze of construction equipment and building materials, using his knowledge of the building's layout to flank Trevor's position. He could hear Trevor's labored breathing, could track his movement by the blood trail he was leaving. You know what the funny thing is? Trevor's voice came from behind a stack of drywall. I actually enjoyed Diana's company. She's intelligent, attractive, enthusiastic in bed. Under different circumstances, I might have actually loved her. Bobby reached Diana and cut her restraints quickly. Are you hurt? Just bruised. Bobby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about everything. We'll deal with that later. Right now, I need you to get out of here. What about you? I'm going to finish what my father started. Diana hesitated, then kissed Bobby's cheek gently. I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know that what I felt for him, it wasn't real. You and Emma are my family. You always were. I know. Diana moved toward the exit while Bobby stalked Trevor through the construction debris. The wounded man was getting weaker, leaving more blood with each step. Bobby, Trevor's voice was fainter now. Your father never told you the whole truth about that construction accident, did he? Bobby kept moving, closing distance. Edward Mills wasn't just a whistleblower. He was the foreman on that project. He knew about the safety violations and said nothing until after people died. He only testified to save his own skin. Bobby found Trevor collapsed behind a pile of lumber, his face pale from blood loss. The pistol lay just out of reach, and Trevor was too weak to get to it. "My father was a good man," Bobby said quietly. "Your father was a coward who let 17 men die and then blamed my family to cover his own guilt." Bobby knelt beside Trevor, studying the man who'd spent 20 years planning revenge against an innocent family. "You know what the real difference is between you and my father?" "What?" "When my father made a mistake, he tried to make it right. When you made a mistake, you made more mistakes to cover it up." Trevor laughed weakly. "Spare me the moral philosophy. Just finish it." "Oh, I'm going to finish it. But not the way you think." Bobby pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "This is Bobby Mills. I'm at Building 47 in the Riverside District. I've apprehended Trevor Quinn. Send ambulances and police." Trevor stared at him in confusion. "You're calling for help?" "I'm calling for justice. You're going to live, Trevor. You're going to stand trial for every person you've killed. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, knowing that Edward Mills' son was the one who stopped you. You should kill me. I would kill you. I know you would. That's the difference between us." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Soon the building would be filled with law enforcement, medical personnel, and federal agents who would ensure Trevor Quinn never hurt another family. "Bobby," Trevor's voice was barely a whisper now. "What about Diana? What about your marriage?" Bobby looked toward the exit where Diana had disappeared. "Some things can be rebuilt. Others can't. Diana and I will have to figure out which category we fall into. And Emma? Emma will grow up knowing that her father kept his promises. She'll grow up knowing that good people fight for what's right, even when it's difficult." Trevor closed his eyes as the sirens grew louder. "Your father really would be proud." "Yes," Bobby said. "He would." The police found Bobby sitting calmly beside the unconscious Trevor Quinn, his weapons safely secured and his hands visible. Diana stood near the building entrance, ready to surrender herself to federal custody. It was over. Trevor Quinn would never hurt another family. Diana would face consequences for her choices, but she would live. Emma would grow up safe, knowing that her father had protected her when it mattered most. And Bobby Mills had kept every promise he'd ever made. Chapter 9, New Growth. 6 months later, Bobby stood in his backyard with Emma, both of them holding shovels. The bulldozed earth had been cleared away completely, replaced with fresh soil and careful landscaping. They'd planned the new garden together, designing it to be twice as large as the original. "Daddy, are you sure the tomatoes will grow here?" Emma asked, carefully placing seeds in the prepared holes. "I'm sure, sweetheart. Grandma Rose says this is the best soil we've ever had." Emma had grown during the months since Trevor's capture. She was taller, more confident, and had developed a mature understanding of adult complexities that both impressed and saddened Bobby. She knew her mother was in prison. She knew why, and she'd accepted it with the resilience that seemed to define the Mills family. "Will Mommy be able to see our garden when she gets out?" Diana had been sentenced to 3 years in minimum security prison for conspiracy and filing false reports. With good behavior, she might be released in 18 months. Bobby had mixed feelings about her eventual return, but he'd promised Emma they would navigate that situation together when it happened. "If she wants to see it, yes. Do you think she'll want to help us take care of it?" Bobby considered his answer carefully. Diana's letters from prison suggested genuine remorse and a desire to rebuild their relationship. But forgiveness was a process, not a decision, and trust would have to be earned slowly. "I think your mother is learning some important lessons about what really matters in life," Bobby said. "When she gets out, we'll see if she wants to be part of our family again." Emma nodded and continued planting. She'd inherited her grandmother's optimism, but tempered it with her father's pragmatism. She hoped for the best, but prepared for whatever came. Rose emerged from the house carrying a tray of lemonade and sandwiches. At 72, she'd become Emma's primary female role model, teaching her cooking, gardening, and the kind of practical wisdom that came from decades of facing life's challenges head-on. "How's the planting going?" Rose asked. "We're almost done with the vegetables," Emma reported. "Tomorrow we're planting the flower section." Bobby's phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Boss, the Morrison project is ahead of schedule. Crew wants to know if we can start the Martinez renovation early. Mills Construction had not only survived the state investigation, but emerged stronger than ever. The false charges against Bobby had been thoroughly debunked, leading to criminal charges against Paul Hartley and enhanced credibility for Bobby's company. Word had spread throughout the construction industry that Bobby Mills was a man who kept his promises under pressure, and new clients were lined up for months. "Daddy, look." Emma pointed to a section of the garden where green shoots were already emerging. "The seeds we planted last month are growing." Bobby knelt beside his daughter, studying the tiny plants that represented new life growing from carefully prepared soil. The parallels weren't lost on him. Sometimes destruction was necessary before genuine growth could begin. Trevor Quinn had been sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. The federal investigation had connected him to 7 murders across 4 states, with evidence suggesting additional victims that might never be identified. He would spend the rest of his life in maximum security, his elaborate schemes reduced to prison routine and medical appointments. Paul Hartley had received 5 years for fraud and conspiracy. His construction company had collapsed completely, and he'd lost everything: his business, his house, his reputation. Diana's brother had discovered that loyalty to family sometimes came with consequences he hadn't anticipated. "Daddy." Emma's voice interrupted Bobby's thoughts. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect, sweetheart. Just thinking about how much our garden has grown." Emma studied their work with the critical eye of someone who understood that gardens required patience, planning, and consistent care. "It's going to be beautiful when everything grows up." "It already is beautiful." That evening, Bobby sat on his back porch with a beer, watching Emma and Rose examine their plants with flashlights. His daughter was explaining photosynthesis to her grandmother with 8-year-old enthusiasm, using terms she'd learned from library books about botany. Bobby's phone rang. Kevin Walsh, his lawyer. "Bobby, I wanted to give you an update on the civil lawsuit." "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Trevor Quinn's assets are being liquidated to pay restitution to victims' families. You're entitled to significant compensation for business damages and emotional distress." "How significant?" "Probably around $3 million. Maybe more." Bobby was quiet for a moment, processing the information. $3 million would secure Emma's future completely, pay for the best education money could buy, and ensure she never had to worry about financial security. "Kevin, I want all of it to go into Emma's trust fund. Every penny." "Bobby, you could use some of that money for yourself. Buy a new house, expand the business, take a vacation. I have everything I need." After hanging up, Bobby watched his daughter and mother discussing plant biology with the kind of focused intensity that suggested genuine passion. Emma had found something she loved, something that connected her to family traditions while pointing toward her own future. She was growing into someone Bobby was proud to know. A car pulled into the driveway. Jennifer Walsh, the prosecutor who'd handled Trevor's case. She walked around to the backyard with the confident stride of someone who brought good news. "Bobby, how's retirement treating you?" "I'm not retired. Just selective about my projects." Jennifer sat beside Bobby on the porch steps. "I wanted to thank you again for your cooperation during the investigation. Without your evidence, Quinn might never have been caught." "Any word on other potential victims?" "The FBI is still investigating. They've identified at least 12 women who fit Quinn's pattern of targets, and they're working with international authorities to track his activities in Costa Rica and other countries." Bobby felt grim satisfaction at the scope of justice being served. Trevor Quinn's arrest had saved lives that would have been lost if his pattern had continued. "What about the children we found in Arizona?" "All identified. All returned to their families for proper burial." Some of those families had been searching for answers for years. Jennifer stood to leave, then paused. "Bobby, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you ever regret not killing Quinn when you had the chance? I know he threatened your daughter." Bobby considered the question seriously. There had been moments during the confrontation when killing Trevor would have been easy, justified, and probably satisfying. But Emma needed to grow up with a father who chose justice over vengeance, who built solutions instead of just destroying problems. No, Emma needs to see that good people solve problems the right way, even when the wrong way would be easier. Jennifer nodded approvingly. "That little girl is lucky to have you as a father." After Jennifer left, Bobby joined Emma and Rose in the garden. His daughter was using a magnifying glass to examine soil composition, making notes in a small notebook with the dedication of a serious scientist. What are you studying, Em? I'm trying to figure out why plants grow better in some soil than others. Grandma Rose says it's about nutrients and pH levels, but I think there's more to it. What do you think? Emma looked up from her notebook, her face serious in the flashlight beam. I think plants grow better when they're planted by people who love them. Love makes everything grow better. Bobby felt his chest tighten with pride and affection. At 8 years old, Emma had identified something that some adults never learned. That love was the essential ingredient in everything that lasted. I think you're absolutely right, sweetheart. Rose smiled at both of them. Emma, why don't you show your father what we planted in the corner section? Emma led Bobby to a corner of the garden where a small apple tree had been planted. It was barely 3 feet tall, its young branches reaching toward the sky with determined optimism. It's just like the tree you planted with Grandma Rose when you were little, Emma explained. In 20 years, it'll be big enough for my children to climb. Bobby stared at the young tree, understanding the lesson his mother had been teaching. Some things took time to grow, but when they were planted with love and tended with care, they lasted for generations. Emma, there's something I want you to always remember. What, Daddy? No matter what happens in life, no matter what problems you face or what challenges come your way, you come from people who plant trees they'll never see fully grown. You come from people who build things that last. Emma nodded solemnly. And I come from people who protect their families. That's right. That's exactly right. As they walked back toward the house, Emma's hand in his, Bobby felt the deep satisfaction that came from keeping promises. Emma was safe. Trevor Quinn would never hurt another family. Diana was learning consequences and might eventually earn redemption. And in Bobby's backyard, a garden was growing that would feed his family for years to come. Some things, once planted properly, lasted forever. Just like love, just like justice, just like the promise Bobby Mills had made to protect his daughter, a promise that would outlast everything else in his life. The garden was their legacy now, proof that good people could build something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal and loss. And every seed they planted together was a promise to the future that some things were worth fighting for.